Do you know my childhood dream was actually to have an office job?
Wow.
It was like
I'm
so
so glad I
boring.
asked this question. Please explain that.
For me, songwriting is like a breathing in and out. Like I can't just breathe out output all the time because I'll like stop. It can be listening to new music that I've not heard before, or read poetry, or read a book that's going to inspire me, listen to a sermon, or just the simple stuff like walk in nature. And I realized if I'm trying to be a certain thing that I'm not, or like create a persona, then I always have to act as that person online, or like this is how I want to be perceived, or whatever it is. And that's just tiring. And so I realized the only way I can like make content and post things online that isn't draining is if it's just me and I just like press record and be myself.
You know, it's like we use genres to like give us some clarity on like what we're talking about.
Mm-hmm.
But in the end, it's like what you said. If it's like a good song that people connect with, like I don't care what genre it is, you know?
Yeah. Some of it's super basic, like just being healthy. Like half of the time I feel like I'm creatively blocked. I'm probably just like tired and I'm not eating well and I'm not sleeping on time. I'll do like really simple stuff to just try and be a healthy human being.
Jonathan, man, this is so great to see you and finally meet you. Like,
I know.
it is so funny when you work with someone over text and then you don't actually get to meet them for a while. But dude, it's great to meet you.
Great to meet you too. Yeah, I'm very much a text person. I'm always like, I forget that I've not actually spoke to people because I just feel like I have.
Yeah. Are you a text or a voice message person?
I'll only voice message if there's like too much to say, and then it ends up being like a 10-minute podcast that I force my friends to listen to. So,
do you enjoy receiving voice messages?
No, well, it depends on the length. I can tell when they're like 5 of them come in and they're all 3 minutes long. I'm like, okay, I need to sit down and make a cup of tea. It's going to be a while. 2 times speed.
Yeah, I'm a fan of the fact that it like will type it out for you now.
Transcript.
But
yes.
it does a terrible job at it.
Yes, it's so bad.
Yeah. Like I actually like read yours the other day and I had to go back and actually like listen to it after reading it because I still had no clue what you're talking about.
That's so tough. So all of my friends know about me that I love sending voice messages because I actually don't like texting that much.
Mm-hmm.
And I try to keep them pretty short, like 2 to 3 minutes at most. But yeah, so you would not like texting with me because I mostly send voice messages at this point.
That's all right.
Yeah. So Jonathan, this is our podcast for our brand Project Songbird. So our whole desire is just to help artists and songwriters. That's it. We want to help them like remain independent if they want to. So we're not trying to be like a label or anything like that, but we produce, we mix and master. But really what we want to do is help put artists together in community, give them free educational resources, all that. So as we're kind of talking, we're just so excited to hear from you, just to get some insight and to learn some things that maybe our listeners can learn from. I think our listeners are all along the spectrum. Some of them have never written a song, to some of them have written many albums and are having a little bit of success. So it's kind of everywhere in between.
Sure.
So with that all in mind, we would just love to hear, as we start, just your story. How did you get into what you do? What were just kind of some of the steps along the way that are just kind of interesting? And then kind of how would you describe like where you've landed now?
Sure. Wow. I hope I have something to share. I feel like I'm still figuring out so much. My journey started, it's funny that I even make music or do songwriting because I didn't think I would be here, or I didn't really ever plan to do music. I think music was something I always loved and I appreciated as a listener. And I was part of a very big family that's very musical as well. So there were just lots of influences around me growing up. I'm actually the youngest of 7 kids. So it's like a big old family. So yeah, I just grew up with like a brother who was a worship leader in church and another brother who was like a DJ in clubs. And then like a whole spectrum of like my dad's music was very kind of 60s, lots of harmonies and folk and that kind of stuff. And then brothers that were very into like 80s music and dance music, and growing up in Manchester too, like a very musical city. So it's the land of Oasis and New Order and Joy Division and all that stuff. So it's just I feel like I was around music a lot and always loved it. But my plan was actually to go and do graphic design. I always loved like visual art. So I either wanted to go into like animation or design or filmmaking or anything that was visual. and somehow landed up back at music. So I think, it was just always my little outlet for kind of creating things. I just downloaded Fruity Loops in like 2010, I think it was, because Soulja Boy uses it, and that was enough for me.
Big influence there.
Oh yeah, huge. You can hear it, I think. But yeah, and then I got a Mac and realized you can't get Fruity Loops on Mac at the time. So I found my way to Ableton, and then just started to make like remixes of songs from YouTube, and a lot of electronic music kind of stuff is how I got started. But at the same time, I was a worship leader in my little family church, and so I had this like combination of like growing up with a lot of musical influences, and I guess church music being my expression of music for the most part, but then sitting down with like music software and thinking, okay, how do I just create something that I really enjoy and is kind of a fun expression for me? So I suppose in a good way, I had no expectation of it being anything. So I was just kind of making music for fun and trying to see if I could bring all of that together, like the folk music and electronic music and singing hymns and like the whole combination of it. And so, my genuine aim was to like put some songs on SoundCloud and just let my friends hear it. And that was it. And then it just kind of grew from there. And I still remember getting the email from like somebody I didn't know that said they'd listened to my music. And I was like, wait, people are listening to this stuff.
Great.
And it just, there was no like one big moment where it took off or anything like that. It was just a very slow build up of like, I guess 14 years I've been doing it now. So very grateful to be able to make music and have this as like a job. Is kind of crazy, but yeah, it was just a lot of self-teaching myself from YouTube and putting things out and trying to gradually get better with each thing. So
yeah, I definitely feel like I didn't know the visual arts thing, but that definitely comes across in your content, that you're a very like visual person. So I think that's pretty cool. Part of your story.
Yeah.
And then you started a band called Rivers and Robots.
Yes.
I'm so curious to know where that name came from first.
So am I. I think I was 18, and I think at the time it was probably like 2010, 2011. And it was at that point where like it was the really hipster thing of like lots of bands with beards, and they all had like something and something. And I was just trying to find a name like that. And I suppose what I was trying to capture is like, I was trying to combine folk music and electronic music. And so I was like, what's something that's very melodic and flowy, and then something that's very like beat driven and electronic. So I ended up with Rivers and Robots, but such a weird name.
Hey, actually, I just thought of this right now. My wife was telling me, so she's homeschooling her kids, and they're just learning like weird stuff sometimes.
Yeah.
And she was saying that in grammar, there's this idea that you always have the I vowel before an O or an A vowel.
Oh,
so like tic-tac-toe. Like it's always like it and then something else. So like rivers and robots.
Oh, wow.
Like robots and rivers doesn't work in our brain. So that's just kind of like interesting.
That's so fun. And so for the last, from what I can tell, 5 or 6 years or so, you've been doing the solo artist thing. Completely independent. Is that right?
Yes. So I have a distributor label, but I'm not like signed to a record deal or anything like that. So yeah,
it's amazing. I'll never forget when I first listened to your music. It was Slow Down, which is obviously one of the most popular songs. And it literally came up. It was the algorithm on Spotify, and I was like, "Who is this guy?" And then I listened to your 24 Hours beat tape, which was amazing. And then David one day was like, "Yeah, dude, you should listen to this song I'm mixing for this guy named Jonathan Ogden." And I was like, "Oh, I know who Jonathan Ogden is."
So cool.
So yeah, dude, it's just really cool to see the progression of your artistry, and where it's gone all these years. And so, even to start off, we would love to hear about your songwriting process and how that's been for you, how it's even progressed over the years, and some of the things that you've learned. And so, while we're on the topic of band and solo artistry, can you even talk about, to start off, what is the difference between writing with a band and with a group of people and having to collaborate, and then having your own personal artistry where you are expressing nobody but yourself?
Yeah, I think I've always written in quite a insular way. Like, I think songwriting is just very personal for me, and it's very mysterious. I don't really know how to like put it in a box and say like this is exactly what I do. I think a lot of the time I just see it as a way of almost journaling or praying. It's like kind of just, I want to express something, and sometimes I don't even know what's going on inside, but writing a song helps me figure that out. And most of the time I do have a bit of a rhythm of like sitting down to write a song, but I'd say probably 80% of it is not when I'm sat down trying to write a song. It's kind of when I'm driving somewhere, or like just a melody comes into my head, or I'm thinking about an idea. It's just all like voice memos in my phone of just me rambling and trying to explain to my future self what I'm hearing in my head. And I think even when we had the band, I would start the song on my own and just still be kind of in my own headspace. And then when I felt like there was a shell of something cool, then I would bring it to the band and we'd develop it and add a lot of musical ideas in there. So I think even now that I'm doing solo music, I have a similar process. Like, I kind of sit on my own to kind of craft the main melody and the meaning of the song and the lyrics, and then I'll bring in a lot of friends to like flesh out the musical side of it, and like just people that can do things that I can't do and can hear a different idea in there. So I guess the only difference is I don't have like a set band of like the same people every time. So I'm just always bringing in different people, which there is something great about working with the same people every time, because you like build this level of consistency and like you can just gel so quickly. But I love the diversity of like bringing in a lot of collaborators as well. So yeah, I enjoy both.
Yeah, that's definitely something we've tried to like highlight for the artists we work with. I think so many times we think songwriters do everything. So like they listen to your music and they're like, I want to touch everything. I got to control everything. And it's like, no, like people that are really successful invite a lot of people into the process. And that's, I think, surprising for some people to hear. It opens up the door for like collaboration, which is hard sometimes. Yeah. And sometimes like you might have a vision of what you want something to be, and someone else says something, you're like, I don't know. So I think that gets a little tricky. But again, I just think people are surprised by that. So when it comes to like your music, what would say are like the things that only you do, and then what are the things you invite other people in? Because you do songwriting, you do production. I know you've like done some mixed stuff. You obviously are a visual artist. But like what things are you sometimes hiring out or inviting other people in on?
Yeah, I feel like I have spent a long time trying to like make what's in my head. I think that was like the biggest task of making music for me, was like I can hear something, but I don't know how to create it and make it sound like what's in my head. So for me, like learning music production was just about that. I just wanted like, when I have an idea, I kind of hear everything. I hear like the layers of what the drums are going to be and the textures in there. And so I just wanted to know enough that I could sit down and like, this is what's in my head and it's as an audio file now. But I think once it gets to the really technical end of like the real like mixing and mastering stages, where I can kind of fumble my way along and do something that's okay. But I just know there are people who like, that's what they do and will do a much better job. So yeah, I try and always bring another pair of ears in the final stages, just to like have someone else hear it and make sure it's like, okay. And then even writing wise, I don't know, I've had an interesting relationship with the whole co-writing thing. I was pretty much just used to writing songs on my own. And then I almost felt like you're supposed to co-write, because I got into more of that world where it's all like group writing sessions and going to writing camps and all this kind of stuff. And I just suddenly thought like, oh, I've been doing it wrong. Like, this is what you're supposed to do. And I didn't really enjoy it. I think I just found it very hard to like throw ideas into the room and not overanalyze in my head and think, is this good? And I sometimes found that I was just forcing something, or like we'd sit down in a group and it'd be very like, okay, what are we feeling today? And what's the kind of theme? And for me, I can't just like conjure it up that quickly. Like it's usually a theme that develops over like months, and it's the song's like part of my life. So it's like hard to just be like, okay, here's an idea. So I had to learn to let go of a lot of, like, I suppose, fear of what people would think in a co-writing session, and just being so precious about ideas that I had. But then also realizing, like, I think it's okay to write songs on my own as well. And like,
oh yeah,
I found this way of co-writing where there's just a few people that I really connected with, and I know I don't need to spend a long time like explaining what I'm trying to do or like what the vision is. And it's more like text messages usually. So I'll just kind of have a piece and I'll be like, okay, I've got this verse and a bit of a chorus. I'm going to send it to this guy because I know he totally gets what I'm doing. And we'll just bounce files back and forth, or maybe jump on a call or do an in-person thing. But yeah, I'm always kind of just ping pong MP3s all over the place to like people that I think, oh, they'll have a good idea for this, and wait to hear what comes back. So yeah, I think I found a way that works for me. There's a bit of balance of both, but yeah, it's an interesting process.
I feel like also you brought up a lot of times that like your music's very personal to you. What level on your writing are you thinking about other people, like the listener? And what level are you just like, I just love this? Like, are you thinking about how the listener is going to interpret things or perceive things? Like, oh, that'd be cool for someone to hear or experience, or is it just like, nah, whatever I think is cool is what is happening?
And not even just with songwriting, but throughout the entire songmaking process, production, mixing, mastering, into the end.
Yeah, good question. I think I do a bit of both. I think at least in the initial stage, I try and write with the idea that maybe no one's going to hear this. And a lot of the time they don't, because I write songs that just stay on my hard drive and they might not get released. But I don't know if it's selfish sounding, but I think the initial thing, I am kind of writing just what I need to write. And it's just this very like, mysterious personal process. And I think there's a point, I think I know if I like a song when I just always want to come back to it and I keep listening to it over and over, and maybe it's actually helping me see something or remind me of something. And then the thought is probably, could this help someone else, or would somebody else connect with this idea as well? And I love that aspect of it. I think it's just an immense privilege if anyone can connect with a song that I've written and it helps them through something, or I guess from the Christian music point of view, like if it helps them see God and like worship him in some way, then that's like, I can't think of a bigger privilege as a songwriter. But so I do sometimes, like even with friends, like I'll have conversations with friends going through things and I'm like, I want to write a song for you, like your situation, and help give language to that feeling. So I do definitely think about other people in the writing process. But sometimes I overthink it and I get really like paralyzed by expectation. Or I try and overanalyze, like, okay, this song was really popular, or people like this thing, and do I need to do that again? Or is it bad to repeat what I did before? Do I need to like mix it up in some way? Or comparing to what other people are making, all that stuff. So as soon as I get too deep down that end, I just kind of freeze and I don't know how to create. And so there's a little bit of me that kind of needs to ignore that whole expectation and just pretend that no one's going to hear this. And it frees me up to write, I think. And usually when I try and overanalyze, it doesn't work anyway. Like I've had songs in the past where I'm like, okay, this one's going to be like the one people connect to and the one people relate with. And then I'll have the song that's like the weird one that I just wanted to make for fun. And that was like me just enjoying myself. And then that's the one that connects with people usually. So I've just seen that enough times now to realize I think people want something authentic, and it's usually authentic if you love it as well. And it's kind of nourished you as well before it goes out to the world, kind of thing.
Totally. I don't know if you listen to Rick Rubin at all, or
I've heard a couple of YouTube clips. That's
okay, cool. I saw a YouTube clip just the other day where he said pretty much the exact same thing, where somebody asked him the question we just asked you. They're like, do you consider the audience at all? He was like, not even a little bit, which to me like feels like a superpower.
Right.
But he said that, and he was explaining, he was like, I don't take them into consideration like at all. And he was like, I just focus on me. I have the artist focus on themselves. And it just so happens to be that the best thing you can do for the audience is be authentically you and write what you want to write.
Yeah.
So, yeah, really well said. Yeah. Awesome. So moving on specifically to your journey, like just as an independent artist, I'm very fascinated with this. Can you kind of talk about what maybe some advantages to being an independent artist and some disadvantages versus being an artist under a label or, you know, having a little bit more structure around them? What's been your journey with that and some of the tensions you've had to manage?
Sure. I think there's one big advantage would be like the flexibility, which I really enjoy. I like that I get to make decisions and just decide I'm going to release this thing or I'm going to give this away for free or drop a random EP with no marketing. Like, it's kind of fun just to be able to do that. And from I guess similar to what you're saying, like that Rick Rubin idea, like it kind of feels like that in the way that you can release things. Like you get to do it your own way and not think too much. I think the downside would be it's a lot of work. And like, I don't know. I think labels and all that kind of thing can get a bad reputation from the indie world, but it's also like a team behind you and like just extra hands on deck to help you with things. So I just didn't realize how much goes into making music and releasing music. And when you're fully independent, I think there's so much you have to do and learn. And I just realized some days like I'm my own like manager and accountant and PR person and social media person. And I've tried to kind of assemble a bit of a team just for my friends because there's just some things where I'm like, I can't do all of this well. But yeah, I think the payoff is like you get to do things your own way and have that flexibility as well. So I think if you're prepared to do a lot of like just work of like Googling things and being like, how do we do this? And I've had like mentors along the way as well that have been so helpful to like understand the music world. So yeah, there's just a lot to it.
Yeah, I think that's true too. Even independent artists still have a team of some sort. Like you still got your people that you're going to go to for certain parts of the projects. You're going to have people you're going to bounce ideas off of and get feedback. And yeah, team's important.
I think a lot of people in your shoes, or I guess few steps behind you, are often surprised by the things that you just mentioned that they run into with like keeping track of money and even having, if you want to go on tour, like having to be your own tour manager and all the things. And so I think this conversation is helpful because we want to help prepare people for like what's ahead and help them not be surprised.
Yeah, that's true. I think I'm always like, I joke with some of my friends because they assume that I'm just sitting around with a piano all day, just like singing. And I was like, I think if I break down like week by week what I actually spend my hours doing, it's mostly writing emails and replying to people. Like I'm just kind of typing things and then every now and then I write a song. There's like so much other stuff.
Totally. I'm curious to know about your location. So you said you live in Manchester, in the UK. And I want to know if you have noticed any differences between what Artistry is like in the UK versus the US. What I want to help people see is like, what are some of the influences that even your location has on your artistry and some of the decisions that you make and the way you have to go about it?
Sure. Yeah, I think the UK is pretty different. We definitely have like a music scene here that's like quite unique and there's a lot of fun stuff happening, especially in London with like the whole crossover of like jazz, alternative, R&B, like I'm a big fan of artists like Cleo Soul at the moment and Salt with an U, SAULT. And there's just like a lot of collectives of people making really interesting stuff and just drawing from a whole bunch of influences that I love. But I think it also helps that it's a small country. There's not loads of places you can tour. You probably hit like 3 or 4 cities and that's kind of it. And it's pretty cold and wet and grey. And I think that helps you write songs because you kind of just stay indoors and feel sad and make things. But there's definitely a lot less infrastructure. particularly for what I'm doing, I felt like so like I didn't fit anywhere for a long time. And I was trying to do this whole like being a Christian artist, but making music that sounds different and doesn't fit where people expect it to be. And so in the UK, I feel like there's not really, there's like 2 or 3 Christian radio stations. And there's not really like a CCM in that sense, like a contemporary music. So it's either you're like a mainstream artist and you do pop, or you're like a worship songwriter. So there wasn't really this in between of like, this isn't a church song, but I am singing about God, but it's like indie folk, or it's like jazz and hip hop. So just for a long time, I found in the UK, people didn't know what to do with me, or like, they were like, do we book you for a church conference or a music festival? Or like, what do you do? But I think there is like this, there's so many little niches of like just cool things happening. And eventually I found friends who were doing similar things to me, and we found our own little like community of people that we just understood each other. And yeah, I think people are just very open to anything. Like, it's so not like specific boxes of like, oh, I'm just into this genre, or I just do this. I think people kind of appreciate and want to hear most things. And so I found that there aren't boxes in a good way. Like sometimes you want that box, so you can just say, I can fit this event and I can do this like, structure. But the lack of box is also really fun, because you can just kind of show up anywhere and be like, this is what I do, and you might like it. And, yeah, so I enjoy that. I think it's fun here.
Man, that's so true. I don't think I know anybody that would say they only like one very specific type of music.
Yeah.
You know, it's like we use genres to like give us some clarity on like what we're talking about. But in the end, it's like what you said. If it's like a good song that people connect with,
yeah,
like I don't care what genre it is. You know?
Yeah. And I'm glad you brought this up, because I'm very fascinated with the range in your artistry, and even within one album, your last record. There is such a range between like the acoustic kind of folky thing and the R&B jazz stuff that you do. And so how do you find like, I guess, this security in like, I'm going to make whatever I want in this album, like stylistically? And even still, like, that's not even like to say that it didn't all gel together. It actually did. So what is kind of, even with your last record as an example, how do you kind of like set vision for yourself of like, I'm going to take these two contrasting things and make it all gel together, and people are going to like it or they're going to not. It's going to be cool.
Yeah, I think it's just creative ADHD, basically. I always struggle to stick on one topic and one idea, and I used to think that was like a weakness, that I had to specialize or like find a lane, and I just can't do it. I'm always like, once I've made one album, I'm like, I don't want to make that again. I want to find a new thing. And I think there's still consistency. Like you say, I think you sometimes feel like you're going all over the place, but like my voice is still my voice. And like the kind of melodies that I gravitate to, or the way that I play chords, and like there's certain things that are always just going to sound like me, even in different genres. And I think in general, I just tell people I make chill music, because it's the easiest way to like encapsulate it all. Like that's a general mood that is going to be in everything, whether it's an acoustic song or like electronic pop. It's always going to be quite chill and like have this piece to it. So I think through experimenting, I've found the common threads of like, this is kind of my sound, but it gets filtered in different ways. But I still worry sometimes, and I'm like, I think that's why I get in my head about the expectations. It's like, I always want to try a new thing, and then every album feels like, oh no, are people going to like this? And I was talking to one of my friends who's a producer as well, and just saying like, even the next song I'm about to release, I'm like nervous about it, because I'm like, I just don't know how it's going to go down, and it's something I've not done before. And he was like, I think that's a good feeling though, right? And I had to agree with him, because I just thought, yeah, if I was always putting out music that I knew, okay, this is safe and it's what I've done before and people will like it, and I can just kind of repeat the formula, I think I'd probably lose some of the joy in it. Although I do love some artists like that. Like there are certain artists I just want to hear them do their thing every time. But I think there's other artists that just whatever they release is going to be a bit different, and that's part of the fun too. So I've had to embrace that as just part of my sound, is that it will always change in a weird way. And yeah, find the common thread through all of it. So I just try not to overthink and make what feels good.
Totally. Go ahead.
I have so many different questions that I'm thinking of.
Well, let me stay here real quick. I love what you just said. My favorite artist is John Bellion. And I feel like I hear some influence in your music from him.
I love him.
But he's great. And he said it with much stronger language, what you said, which is that he was like, man, like I could just recreate All Time Low and like do that same thing over and over again. He said, but it would literally drive me crazy. I cannot, I can't do that over and over again. And I feel with you for myself. And then on behalf of other artists that it's like, it's very tempting to, once you have, you found something that hit the target and hit the bullseye, and it's like, man, I want to do that again and again and again from the monetization and the business standpoint. And at the same time, you have to come to the conclusion of whether or not you are capable of doing that within your soul of like, man, like, is this going to compromise my creativity and my expression of self if I just try to recreate this thing that represented this specific moment in my life, not as I'm progressing? So, which again, some people, like you said, are capable of doing that. I think Forrest Frank is a really good example. We say often, and I think a lot of people would agree with us, like he has a very one-dimensional sound. But I don't think it's out of a lack of authenticity. I think it's like he's just being himself and like having fun, and it just so happens to be that himself right now, and maybe this will change in a couple of years, is this like hip hop pop thing that he's doing, and it sounds they're bangers every time. You don't see much variety in it, but that's okay because it's him.
Yeah, I don't think he cares.
He doesn't care.
Yeah,
he's not trying to recreate.
Well, I was thinking if I was going to say like Jonathan Ogden, like chill music guy, it'd be like Forrest Frank, happy music guy.
Yes,
you know.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Like dude just doesn't know how to. He just doesn't want to write a song. It's not just happy, you know, which is pretty awesome. Yeah, I think there's so many. I agree with you. So many different ways to have a common thread, like you said. I think lyrics is another way. Like themes is another way. I think the engineers you bring in either on the front end in production or on the back end could bring some cohesion to a project that might not have as much cohesion until the end product. So there's lots of different ways to get there. Okay, fun, quick question. What are like 3 of your favorite things you've accomplished as a songwriter?
Oh, goodness.
And it could be a little braggy. It's okay. Just like, what are like 3 things you're just like, man, like I'm stoked about that.
Yeah. This is very hard for a British guy. We're very self-deprecating. Let me think. I think was it last year? 2 years ago, I did a tour for my Future Forever album. And it was just like the most fun I've had on a tour. And speaking of like the friends and collaborations thing, like I had a team of 8 of us who were like all some of my best friends. And I feel like we just went crazy. We like tried to do so much because I just wanted it to be an experience. And we thought about everything from like the visuals on stage to like, we even had like certain smells that we had that were like near the merch stand that were like linked to themes in the album and all this stuff. And it was this like mega operation that just took a year of planning for like a 2-week trip, I think. But it was just so fun, and like coming back from that, such a feeling of like, oh my goodness, we did it. So yeah, and getting to like be face to face with people that engage with the music rather than just online is like so fun. So that tour, a very fun, like, I felt like I was doing a side quest when I did this, but I ended up in a coffee shop in Japan, and I've been doing this thing called coffee shop beats, where I just take my laptop into a cafe and like try and make something in an hour or 2. And this coffee shop is in like the coolest district of Tokyo, and they'd heard my music and really liked it and asked me to come and do a session in the cafe. So I was like next to the barista on the counter, like making beats while he's like pouring coffees for people. And it was just one of those like zoom out, you see yourself in third person moments. And I'm like, how am I here? What am I doing right now?
Right.
But so fun. And A third one. Oh, I think probably the Take Me Back EP that I did recently, that you were part of, David. Yeah, I just got to work with some musicians on that one that were like, I just never thought I would get to work with. I think the drummer, Brian, he played with Sufjan Stevens on a couple of his albums and tours. And I was just like trying so hard not to fanboy while trying to make my own music. I was just like, tell me stories. I want to know everything. But yeah, that was just a moment of like, I had a voice memo demo of like this rough song. And then I'd sit in the room with these guys and we'd just play it through together. And like, I nearly cried the first song. So I was just like, how have you made my little voice memo sound like this? It's so cool. So yeah.
Yeah, that EP was so like different for me. So refreshing, just like something fun. I know even like it was fun because you trusted me a lot with that because you kind of gave me like a song and I was like, I'm gonna go a really different direction maybe than what you asked. And like it was fun. I think one of the songs too landed on New Music Friday, which for me was just like super exciting because it's it's kind of like validation sometimes, and like you don't need this, but it's just nice to have like, oh man, my work is up there against like some other really good work. Yeah, and that it's just an awesome feeling. So
yeah, no, I totally get that. Every time I see like artists that I love, and if a song is like in there in a list, I'm just like, wait,
yeah, I'm
like,
included alongside
these people. Yeah,
yeah,
so fun.
Dude, that's awesome. What are some of like your personal biggest challenges?
So many. I think it's my own head.
There's that British self-deprecating.
It's true though. It's my own head. I think I get so like overthinking, introspective sometimes, and I mentioned it a few times, but it is that thing of like expectations. What are people expecting? And I don't even know if those are real sometimes, or if it's just my own head thinking like, I have to do this. I'm supposed to do this. So I think a lot of the work for me in writing is like unblocking and like getting rid of stuff just so that ideas can flow. And when I'm in the most like free, childlike, fun space is like when the ideas tend to come. And the moment I get really analytical and start trying to figure out the best way of doing all this stuff, I kind of freeze up. And so I find that hard.
Can you get real practical with that? Because I think that's great. Like, what do you practically do when you're like, I'm in my own head. I need to get things out. I need to get to this childlike state. Like, then what do you do?
Some of it's super basic. Like, it's just being healthy. Like, half of the time I feel like I'm creatively blocked. I'm probably just like tired and I'm not eating well and I'm not sleeping on time. And I'll do like really simple stuff to just try and be a healthy human being. But also I do a lot of journaling. I try and do it every morning and just like clear out whatever's in my head, because often it's just like the mind is busy, right? There's just so many things you're keeping in here that are like you're going over all the time that you don't realize are actually taking up so much space. So just for me to write it out and like put it somewhere physical, I'm like, okay, that doesn't need to be in my head now. And then I try and like soak in as much inspiration as I can. For me, songwriting is like a breathing in and out. Like I can't just breathe out output all the time because I'll like stop. And so the breathing in is always like, it can be listening to new music that I've not heard before, or trying to like read poetry or read a book that's going to inspire me, listen to a sermon, or just the simple stuff like walk in nature. And like I just got back yesterday from 3 days on the south coast in Cornwall, where it was like just looking at the sea. Got this like Airbnb that looks into the ocean, and there's just a few of my friends that were like, okay, we've been in the city too long, we're all stressed. We just need to go and look at waves for a bit. And it just, even that felt such a unblocking thing, like breathing in the like clean air, and it was quiet, and I'm back now and I'm like, okay, I'm ready to let things flow. So it's simple stuff.
Yeah, no, that's great.
That's awesome. I would like to hear about your social media content. I love seeing your stuff on Instagram a lot. And really because it seems like it's just authentically you. Like you're not trying to do what everybody else is doing, but it seems like you make content that you enjoy making. Am I right in saying that or wrong in saying that? Yeah. And so can you just talk about like kind of point people in the right direction of like how do you make content that you enjoy making so that it's sustainable for you and that you keep up with it consistently as an artist?
Rather than like I have to make content. I guess I'll hop on this trend and do this thing
and dance to my songs.
Yeah.
Trying to do TikTok dances to my slow acoustic music. It's not great. I think one thing that clicked with me a lot was like, I feel like I just say authenticity all the time, but it kind of is that. Like, I realized if I'm trying to be a certain thing that I'm not, or like create a persona, then I always have to act as that person online, or like try and get into that headspace to like, this is how I want to be perceived or whatever it is. And that's just tiring. And so I realized the only way I can like make content and post things online that isn't draining is if it's just me and I just like press record and be myself. And I used to think artists had to be really serious and very like deep and meaningful, and you know, especially with the kind of music I make, it's pretty like deep stuff. And so I often felt like I had to come across that way in how I shared too. And I think it was probably like the pandemic time when like TikTok and Reels were getting really big, and I kind of loved that they were an outlet for like goofy ideas, because before that it was like, I'll make a YouTube video and it's going to be this 10-minute edited, like all put together filtered thing. And now it's like I can make a 30-second video that will be gone from people's feed in 2 days, and it doesn't really matter. So I had to undo that idea that everything has to be like an art piece and a like perfectly curated piece of content that's going to look great in the feed. And I just started like pressing record and being myself. And so again, I think I still wrestle with like, am I too all over the place? Because you could go on my page and like watch 10 videos and still not know what I do, because I'm just like goofing around. And sometimes I'm like, I should really post about my music or like do more of the normal artist thing. But I just enjoy it. I don't know. I think it's part of the challenge too. Like it goes back to that indie musician thing, right? Like you do have to be your own social media person and marketing side. And I don't know any artist that really loves that or like self-promoting and like talking about their own stuff. But I try and just not take it too serious. I just see that it's kind of part of the fun. I'm like, okay, it's part of the territory. This is what you got to do these days. And so I'm just like, how do I have fun with it and not overthink? And again, it's usually the ones that I don't expect that just end up doing really well. And it'll be the most random things. Like, I think last month I made a video about skipping, and I was just like, people should skip more. And it's like the most viral video I've ever had. And I'm like, this is completely unrelated to anything that I do. But
have you seen the video of like people trying to get their family members to skip and like they can't skip anymore?
Oh my gosh.
Yeah. Like, because once you reach like a certain age, some people just like forget how to skip. It's like in their brain, but they try and they just like can't.
That's so sad.
It's another reason to stay healthy, you know?
Yeah.
So you
I'm being
skipping.
a part of that change.
Yeah.
I love what you just said, because I think a lot of artists think that in order to do social media well, they have to just constantly post about their music. Mm-hmm. But what's actually going to engage people to be converted from just a casual listener to a fan is when you are showcasing your entire self, or at least a part of yourself that is separate from your music, like things like skipping and things like shows that you watch and interests that you have, hobbies that you have, because people just want to know that they relate to you in some way and that you are similar and so like them. And so I think it actually and truly, like, this is I enjoy your social media content because it's not just music. I think the reason that people are able to connect with you and other artists like you is because they relate to you in a way that isn't just your music. But it's like, I like skipping, you know, or I like this show. We're not so unlike each other. So
that's true. I guess people, if they just want to listen, they can listen on Spotify or whatever, right? So I think if they're coming to social media, they probably want to see you as a person and like a bit more personality. So,
well, I just know if I really am hooked on somebody's, like if I found somebody on Spotify first and I'm really hooked on their music, we're confronted with this reality. I don't like the music industry works this way, but my first initial act is to be like, oh, I want to get to know them as a person and like, you know, see what they're about. If it were me and Kamo had his ideal music industry world, it wouldn't, you wouldn't have to showcase like your entire life or most of your life for people to become fans. They would just be about the music, but it's not so. And so, yeah, it's just really interesting how that works.
Yeah.
It's true. I have 2 more questions for you. Do you have any like more big questions you want to ask or things you want to talk about?
No.
All right, my last 2 questions, Jonathan. Easy ones. We'll do this one first. What is next for you? Like, what is your plans?
My plans, I'm just writing a lot right now. So I'm working on 2 albums, both with a very different vibe. And so I'm in full hibernation mode right now. And hoping to have something by summer, hopefully.
Yeah. Do you typically, I've talked to a lot of artists that do this, like as soon as they release an album, it's just like an emotional kind of low almost of like, it was so much work to get there. And then you get there and you're just like, oh, I'm just like done for a little bit.
Yeah.
Is that how you are too?
Yeah, I'll take a break from listening to it when it comes out because it's new to everyone else, but probably I've heard it 100 times going over like, is that snare loud enough and all that stuff. So by the time it's out, I'm like, I don't want to hear this for 2 months.
It's just so funny because it's like the expectation is going to be like, this is the mountaintop that I'm climbing to, but you get there and you're like, I'm done. Like, I don't want to do anything else.
It's so true.
Awesome. Okay. What would just be some good general advice you would give to other songwriters?
I think I enjoy listening to things that I don't think I'll like. Like exploring genres that I just are not usually my thing and trying to figure out, even if I don't like it, why do I not like it? Or like, is there something that I do like in it? So I guess the general thing would be like draw inspiration from a wide range and even like non-musical sources, right? Like can a painting inspire your song or like a good movie or, you know, So I think sometimes we just get very narrow, like I'll just listen to stuff that's like what I do and get inspired by that same thing. But I like getting inspired by everything that's like outside of what I do as well. So
yeah.
Wide inspiration.
That's great advice, man. I think it's funny too. There's even like, I want to talk about this one day on the podcast, but there's like different forms of art and some of them I love. And to be honest, some of them I care so little about. But other people love them. Like, I'm just being honest. I'm not a poetry guy.
I knew you would say that.
It's just so funny because there's some people that like, that's like their thing, you know, but for me, it's like, nah, not really into that, you know, but there's other forms of art. I'm like, this is it. Like this inspires me. This gets me excited to create. That is funny though.
I feel that.
Awesome. I have one more fun question to send you off. If you weren't a music artist, what would you be doing instead, vocationally?
Do you know my childhood dream was actually to have an office job?
Wow.
It was like
I'm so glad I asked this question. Please explain that.
I think partly because I was the youngest in my family and all my siblings had like office jobs. I thought that was like the mark of I'm an adult and I've made it, is that like I get to go to the office and like send emails and do paperwork.
You are sending a lot of emails. So.
I am. I'm doing that part. I just need an office. That's what I need. Like a printer and a fax machine. But I think I would be probably doing something really techie. I think I'm a big nerd deep down. So I'd be in either like a design job, but like a very techie design job probably. But yeah, I'm happy with music. I'll stick here for as long as I can.
If you ever want to do a side thing, you should do like motion graphics for videos, but that tell a story, not just like a looping motion graphic, but like, I don't know. I just feel like video content for live concerts needs to be like the next space that gets completely like explored. Because it's just not utilized in a lot of concerts. And you could use so many visuals with your song if it's moving and playing along with your music kind of a thing.
Yeah. That would be really cool.
That'll be your thing if you ever want to try something new.
Another side project to go.
Yeah. Awesome, man. Well, thank you so much for chatting with us and hanging out and giving our listeners some good things to think about.
Yeah, dude. Appreciate you for coming on.
Thanks for having me.